Hi, my name's Connor and we're here on the west coast of Scotland. I've been fishing here for sea trout for about 20 years. It's been an obsession since I was a kid, and I just think they're the best fish out there to catch on the fly. So I first got into coastal fishing for sea trout in Scotland, in the UK, when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I was fishing for mackerel one day and I caught a really nice 1.5 pound sea trout, beautiful bar of silver, lovely markings, completely by accident. Wasn't what I was targeting, but as soon as I caught this fish I was like, wow, that is absolutely stunning. And for me, that is probably where the obsession began. So we're fishing here on the west coast of Scotland. We're fishing a sea loch at the moment, and we've got quite good conditions, quite fair conditions. It's quite calm, usually like a little bit more of a breeze, but it's okay. I would say it's quite fair. We started fishing at the head of the loch this morning, close to where there's a little river, and within quite a short space of time we were already hooked into a sea trout, around about 3/4 pound. For me, a 7-weight rod, 9 foot, is probably the most balanced setup that you can use. I wouldn't limit it to a 9-foot 7-weight. When I first started fishing for sea trout on the coast, I started with a 9-weight, but very quickly realised that I was fishing too heavy. So I would say if you use anything between a 6-weight and an 8-weight, you could very comfortably balance your setup and catch sea trout on the coast without spooking them. The reel I'm using is a large arbor reel. I would always use a large arbor reel. If you can find a reel that's saltwater proof, it always helps, but I would always rinse your gear at the end of the day anyway, because the salt really does corrode, and I've found even using reels with titanium parts on them, they still corrode over time. So you really do need to look after your kit, but if it is made for saltwater, it helps. The line I'm using is a fast intermediate line. So I'll switch between 2 lines primarily, and that's a slow intermediate and a fast intermediate. I will sometimes use a floating line, but you can spook fish. Sea trout will feed quite close to the edge sometimes, and quite often high up in the water column, so you don't really want to be hitting the surface of the water with a floating line and lining the fish. The leader that I'm using is just straight fluorocarbon, so I've got a 10-foot leader on, 12-pound fluorocarbon 1X, and then I've got a dropper about 4 to 5 feet above the point fly. At this time of year, we're in the back end of winter in February, and the water's still a little bit cold, but it is getting a lot milder now. The fish are still a bit lethargic and scavenging. There won't be a lot of food out there for them, so we're using kind of small attractive streamers that we know will catch their eye, and we're fishing a little bit slower than we normally would in the summertime. So just small short strips, and you can see this fly here is bright pink, so that's definitely going to catch their attention if they're in the vicinity. And quite often I'll fish a little bit more subtle fly on the dropper, and the reason for that is the first fly will catch their attention, but sometimes they'll follow the fly. They won't take it with any confidence, they might nibble at it, but as soon as they see this little more subtle streamer pattern in front of it, they'll be like, that looks a little bit more convincing, and they'll take that. And I would say about 50-60% of the fish will take this fly when there is a fish following. Some fish will just follow this fly and not take it and then just turn away. So it's always good to fish something that's a little bit more subtle above the attractor fly. So it's just spat up this small smelt in the net, and you can see there the little streamer fly I'm using is very similar. A little bit darker, but right profile, right size. So the leader I'm using today is Full & Mill Masterclass Universal Fluorocarbon. I always use fluorocarbon on the coast because I find it's got a much better abrasive resistance than other tippets. We're fishing where there's a lot of shingle and mussel beds, and you really need something that's got abrasive resistance when it's, your flies are fishing deep and you're scraping over these mussels. They can be quite torturous on your leader. So I would always fish as well something between 0x and 2x. You really want a strong leader. These sea trout as well can snap your fly line with their teeth. They've got quite sharp teeth, as you would expect, being a predatory saltwater fish. So yeah, you want to be using strong fluorocarbon when you're fly fishing on the coast. In terms of covering the sea trout, your casting, you really want to start with a short cast. You don't want to cast out too far because the sea trout can be in quite close. So start off with a short cast, small mend, very slow strips. Just see if there's anything close in that wants to follow in, and then move out maybe another couple of yards, strip in really slow. If you're finding you're not covering any fish, or you don't think there's any fish in shallow, then just keep casting out further and further. You want to try and fish as much of the water column as possible, because sometimes when it's cold this time of year in February, the fish could be sitting that little bit deeper. So you want to give your flies a little bit of time to sink down. You don't want to start stripping straight away and have your fly sitting just under the surface, because that fish might be sitting in 4 or 5 feet of water and it's a little bit lethargic and sluggish, and it doesn't want to chase your fly, it wants to follow it. So if you get your flies down, maybe count them down 10-15 seconds and then start pulling in slowly, start retrieving slowly. The fish will follow, and quite often just as you're hanging the flies, you're about to lift the flies, that's when the fish will take, if they're convinced that it's a food item. So yeah, at this time of year you do really want to be fishing a little bit slower. So we've just seen a fish moving probably about 10 feet off the shore here, quite close in, so we're just going to try and cover it. So where we're fishing at the moment, the sea trout are actually here all year round. So the sea trout tend to run the rivers quite early here to spawn, and they will run. Fish will actually start entering the systems between April and June, and the fish will spawn between late summer and early autumn, and then they very quickly return to the sea because most of the rivers and burns in this area are quite short. So the sea and there's sea trout that are overwintering as well. They will spend 2 or 3 winters at sea feeding before they run back into the rivers to spawn. So there are always fish here all year round, and they're always within catching distance from the shore. You don't need a boat to go out and get them. No, it's quite easily accessible fishing, and as long as you understand the different methods that are required to fish through the seasons, you will pick up fish through every season of the year. So sea trout fishing on the coast in Scotland is becoming more popular now, and I would say in part to the Scandinavian fly fishers who are starting to produce a lot of YouTube videos, and we're starting to learn a lot more from these guys who've been doing it for a long time in much greater numbers than we are here in the UK. We've always fished for sea trout on the coast here in Scotland in small numbers. It's been a relatively well kept secret between a lot of anglers for a long time. I was quite lucky when I was young that sea trout was one of the first fish that I caught on my own in the sea. But a lot of fly anglers don't really know what's out there in terms of sea trout fishing. The fishing is so diverse. You can find sea trout almost anywhere on the coast. You will find them in different habitats, in different conditions, using different methods, and I really do think it's something that people should consider if they're used to just fishing rivers and lochs and lakes all the time. They should definitely give coastal fly fishing a go.
Yeah.